Welcome back, everyone, to our deep dive into the Black Madonna, the Cult Divinity Lost campaign that is infamously the most intriguing and enticing one that you can find for Cult as of now. I'm David. I'm one part of your host tonight, and with me as well is Martin. Hi, Martin. We both have running the campaign, as I just finished my 49-52 episode campaign in a glorious ending. But Martin, you're still running yours, right? And players are learning things.
Yes, we're at session 21, I believe, right at the cusp of the first chapter.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, and obviously because I got hooked the first time, I just decided to run it again, and you might be able to hear some of that in the next couple of weeks. We'll see. If you are, however, a player or you want to play this campaign, then we advise you to stop listening here. If you listen to the other episodes, then you might as well continue because you're too curious anyway. But yeah, send this video to your GM, like and subscribe, and give us an idea of how we can make this better. We're talking about spoilers. We're going to mention things that happen in the campaign. So from here on end, it will be to your own demise.
Yes, and our goal with this series is to support GMs who want to run the Black Madonna in Cult Divinity Lost, the latest edition of Cult, and quite a bit more narrative-driven than Cult was back in the original 90s version. And we will talk about how to sort of adapt the campaign, what challenges to expect, and how to bring the history and horror and metaphysics to life.
Indeed. And as before, we want to caution that the Black Madonna is a very dark campaign, deals with very mature and traumatic themes of trauma in general, harm to children, war, abuse, death, religious imagery, gore, body horror. It is all that Cult should be. Our discussion might touch on certain scenes and subjects. We won't use graphic description as intended, but it might happen as a reference or an idea, so listener discretion is advised.
And we also want to make it clear that this podcast is a fan project, so we are not officially affiliated with Helmgast or the publishers of Cult Divinity Lost or with the original authors of Cult, and we're simply sharing our own experiences and interpretations and advice for running the Black Madonna.
Indeed. And before we continue our Killer's Dance, I do want to give a shout out and thank you to our supporters as well somehow, Helmgast, who gave us a inside copy for the Black Madonna virtual tabletop, which I will explain a bit in detail in a second. And, well, after that, we'll continue in The Killer's Dance Part 2. With the recent release of Yankei's official The Black Madonna module for Foundry, running this iconic Cult Divinity Lost campaign has never been more accessible or more immersive. This is a complete, ready-to-play digital adaptation of the campaign, bringing its haunting locations to life through fully prepared scenes, atmospheric backgrounds, and visual storytelling tools that immediately set the tone at your table. One of the standout features is the use of annotated maps. Instead of flipping through pages mid-session, GMs can navigate directly to the story by clicking on locations, each map node linking to relevant description, clues, and encounters. It keeps the flow of the game intact and lets you focus on the narrative rather than searching through the book. All major NPCs are fully extracted into individual character sheets, complete with artwork, key information, and mechanics. This means fast introduction, clearer portrayals, and less time spent explaining. Players see who they're dealing with immediately, and the scene can unfold naturally. The module also includes all campaign-relevant player character elements, such as dark secret suggestions and relationships to Magda Orlova, ready to be dragged and dropped directly onto the character sheets. This makes Session 0 and ongoing play smoother, while keeping everything tight integrated with the campaign's narrative. And at its core, the entire campaign has been fully digitized and cross-referenced within Foundry. Journals are interconnected through hyperlinks, allowing you to instantly pull up NPCs, locations, items, or scenes without losing track of where you are. No more getting lost in dense text. Everything is structured to support fast, intuitive navigation during play. This premium module includes 48 journals with over 90,000 words of content, 59 actors including major NPCs and creatures, 40 items tied to the campaign's themes and mechanics, 40 fully configured scenes, and 7 macros to streamline gameplay and setup. All of it pre-configured and ready to run, so you can focus on atmosphere, tension, and a descent into the world of the Black Madonna.
Well, if that hasn't convinced you, I don't know what will. But you also need to know how to run this whole thing. So, Martin, let's continue the Killer Stands Part 2 with... well, we left off in Magda's apartment in Berlin in the reeking and quite intense smell of her bedroom where Magda has been found. Where do we go from here?
Yes. We go immediately to hospital, I think. Or at least Magda does.
That is true.
If any player characters have the wherewithal to call for an ambulance, or one of these nosy neighbor NPCs that might be there might already be doing it. I guess if they don't, we will witness the sad death of Magda Orlova directly in the apartment, I suppose. Because that is in the campaign text what happens very rapidly after Magda is found. She is very poorly, and she dies while doctors are running around not knowing at all what they're dealing with. I guess the illusion sort of shrouds their view. They think they're dealing with some type of heart failure or something, while our player characters, who are themselves infected with the dream curse, have the ability to actually see what is going on, which is so much worse. And I really do encourage GMs to as soon as you can try to show already with the EMTs showing up, sort of that they don't know what's going on. They don't see this the worms, and they don't hear the strange sounds and so on that the player characters do.
I definitely think it's worth bringing in external NPCs to showcase the absurdity of the illness, because clearly the characters are seeing the horrendous condition that Magda is in, and the EMTs are pretty much just like, oh no, she has a fever, but we don't really know, and they might be holding, and her boils are maybe breaking under their pressure. It can be quite a graphic and vivid scene that, should be, I think, incorporated as a bit of a shocker. I think, that should be the shocker here, because ultimately that's the fate that they will come to as well. And if they don't realize it yet, surely will realize after that. So I agree, as you said. If the players don't call somebody, maybe a nosy neighbor hears the shuffling and commotion and comes and calls in. Who knows? Yeah, but before, I guess, leaving the apartment, there's something right next to the bed that maybe the nosy player will immediately pick up. An open book that contains a beautiful little passage, probably the longest handout in the whole book. The Power of Dreams, a book by Philip Kramer, right?
Yes. So here begins, I guess, the biggest sort of stash of documents, kind of. That there's a lot of information and several handouts here that the player characters can get in pretty rapid succession, actually. But this is the big one, and it's quite evocative. It's an excerpt from this Power of Dreams book with Magda's marginalia on it. She has been highlighting and taking notes, and it's a ritual. Well, it's a description of the dream curse, first of all. So it's the first time the player characters get told what it is they're suffering from. That it has been inflicted upon them by someone, some enemy magician, maybe several, as the text suggests. And the ritual describes this procedure for freeing yourself of the curse and or taking revenge on the ones who inflicted it upon you. And it's a long ritual involving, salt and sand and ash and blood and making circles and chanting and all the good stuff that you would expect from Kult, I suppose. And of course, it's a total lie as well.
Yeah, it is a beautiful, beautiful book that doesn't do anything but infester the lie of Chegdigil. I guess as part of the handout, it is the first time we hear the name Chegdigil being mentioned as well. Now, you also have a learned occultist amongst your group, right? How did that fare? Did you give them kind of some sort of recognition for the name Chegdigil, or was there a insight that they had?
Yeah, I have very mixed feelings about the explicit naming of the Death Angel here. Of course, we don't explain that it's a Death Angel, and there are some hints in the book about what you can find about it, the name, which is not really a lot. But I usually am of the philosophy that I don't like to use like the proper actual names of cult beings and Death Angels and so on. And I much prefer to refer to them through all of these evocative aliases and so on that are listed in the core book, or coming up with my own. I think that's just it's more fun for me, and also I think for players who know what Death Angels and principles are, it's kind of a out of character puzzle for them as well. So I didn't actually draw attention to the name. I just, handed out the handout, and the name is right there. I considered maybe changing it, but I didn't. And then I sort of waited for the player characters to pick up on it and react to it, and that happened much later. So actually, for the longest time, we kept referring to this. I used, the C symbol that shows up now and then, and they researched a little bit, and then I sort of gave them a little bit of information, said that it was a prince of hell or something, or like a demon, and referred to it as being named the Corruptor, or Corruptor in Latin. I mean, I guess the D is baked in. And then eventually the connection was made that Chegdigil, who is in these chants, is the same as this demon, the Corruptor, and that's the same as the bloody patriarch. It's like, oh no. So that actually kind of worked out.
Okay.
Of course, if you know the lore on the, if you have read the core book and you see this ritual, you're going to immediately go, oh, Chegdigil, I know who that is. But yeah, depends on who reads the handout first, I guess.
That is true. I do think that there is a point to what you said, that maybe putting the name in there is, I wouldn't say spoiling it, but it's also, if players already know the book or have encountered the Death Angel in other games before, it might lessen the revelation when it comes to the actual ritual. And as they say, names have power, right? Why would the name be... I guess it would be used because the ritual is obviously not as what they intended it to be. So yeah, I'm actually still on the fence about this. I think my players initially did it also quite well because they didn't infer meta information about the character that they already knew. Yeah, I guess it might be worth of a think of how and if you want to maybe change that at least to a different name of the Corruptor, or the Prince of Hell or something, as a Latin translation or something, which might be equally good, but not as revealing initially. Then you can do the revelation later after the ritual happened.
I must say, however, one thing I like about the name being there, because I mean, like we said, the ritual is like a lie. It's planted there by Chagidil to incarnate, like let the incarnates that are in the three Russians free themselves from their bodies and go out into the world and set different parts of the big plan in motion. Right, so it's a total setup to make the player characters do this ritual. But it also says that the three Russians and Philip Kramer, who has written this, he doesn't actually know that it's Chagidil he is bound to. Like, he is sort of an unknowing worshipper, kind of, because the incarnate within him is steering him. And from that perspective, I really love that he has written and published a book that mentions this entity by name, and despite the fact that he's a very knowledgeable magician himself, he has not put this together. He probably doesn't even see the words when he looks at the manuscript. I really like that.
That's a good point.
Of course, I ruined that myself in my run because I let him say the name in a particular scene as if he knew it, but whatever. I think what's in the book is even cooler.
Good point, actually. Yeah, that's a interesting aspect. And as you said, the ritual is a lie, as to invocate Chagdigil incarnate, to bring forth the incarnates, and thus releasing the bound vessels of Chagdigil into the world once more. I think for other aspects of the ritual, we come back a little bit later. Maybe Martin, your probably favorite NPC character comes into play. Because I think otherwise in the apartment, the only other worth mentioning clue or information would be Magda's diaries, the second and more bulbous part of information that gives at least a bit of feedback to the players of what happened to Magda in the last year or so, and can be used as a gap filler of information to kind of reconstruct her last path in life. Obviously, I think that is also possible for extension. You can add as many other entries and diary excerpts as you want. If the characters have taken the major boxes from the Hamburg apartment as well, they can find complementary elements here as well. Anything worth mentioning about the diaries from your perspective?
I guess I like that they did this. Okay, here are the most important excerpts, kind of thing, and that's kind of how the handout is formulated. Even though there would be a certain charm in handing out this big hunk of diary, and they had to have to flip through it to find all the pertinent parts. Also, when combined like that on the page, it has a pretty striking effect when you read it. At least for our group, this was like a rather big sort of oh shit moment. It's like, okay, this is what's going to happen to us. This is not good. And they start calculating back how much time do they have and so on. So it's a good handout.
It is. I agree. And I even added a bit more information here and there if they had specific questions about years and locations that they might have met Magda in their past life. So those entries could be also there, or memories of the characters past, how they encountered Magda, and see maybe their encounter from a different perspective. So a good handout as well, not to be forgotten. And actually, as I just overread it, And you shouldn't, maybe, because I think these are very good examples. In the bookshelf in, I think, the living room, there are these three, amongst various copies and collections, the Compendium Somnia, the Sonni Segreti, and the Somniat ex Inferno by Andronikos. And if you feel happy and funny, you can expand, obviously, what they contain. And I made a bit of an effort to kind of give some insight about what they might contain, about the dream magic and dream worlds that she might be interested in. So yeah, those are also powerful tools that you can already plant there and or have them find and then later read in depth. Because in my perspective, they were pretty much the only two hooks that some of the players had to finding occult books to learn about dreaming and dream magic initially. Besides the tainted, obviously, Philip Kramer editions, which they didn't want to read. I don't know why. But, yeah.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, if you have an occultist book dealer in play, which, I mean, we both had, and I'm sure a lot of groups will have, because, you know, it's Cult. Who doesn't love an occultist book dealer? This is probably the beginning of some book hoarding. That's going to happen in this campaign. You can also steal some books from the Slavic Association if you want, for example, and so on. Yes, so...
Reminds me of the Ninth Gate, Johnny Depp's character beginning his downward spiral about the Book of Hell, basically. Yeah. I think that concludes, actually, Magda's apartment in Berlin. From here on, it should be rather a quick transition, assuming that the characters are not too shady characters to flee the scene while Magda is being transported away. But hopefully you made the connection strong enough that they are interested and at least hopefully invested in her old friend to at least follow her to the Max Bürger Hospital in Schlossgarten, which is about 5 minutes by car from her Berlin apartment. What happens at the Max Bürger Hospital, Martin?
Yeah, according to the text, of course, not being able to follow any text, I let it drag on a little longer and had Magda in intensive care for a while the player characters did other things. But in the text, at least, Magda cannot be treated by these sleeper doctors who do not understand what goes on, and she dies pretty much as soon as the player characters see her in hospital. And that's the continuation, I guess, of this rather upsetting body horror scene in the apartment. You can be heavy-handed with the medical horror, I guess, and the contrast between what the player characters see and what the poor doctors are doing. I definitely had the doctor, I think she's called Kellerman or something like that, who comes out to give them the sad news. She definitely had, stuff on her white coat that she couldn't see from, touching these boils and pustules and so on. And it's it really drives home. I think this is, to me, a quintessentially culty thing. This sort of very physical, awful thing that you feel kind of viscerally in a way, and then others just don't see it. And of course, player characters will first go, oh, I must be hallucinating, but out of character we know that they're not, right? And we pretty soon meet a doctor who actually understands a bit about what's going on, or at least sees a bit of reality. Unfortunately, he is the pathologist who works only with the samples from the dead, I guess. So he can't help Magda either, but he can at least give the player characters some information, and he can certainly study them to understand the disease progression. Which
As any good scientist would do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really love a creepy pathologist, and Dr. Richter is just great.
No, he truly is. And I think if the question about how does Richter meet the characters, if the players come in significantly later after Magda was admitted to the hospital for whatever reason, he might be already waiting at reception and kind of asking the receptionist, like, has anyone requested or come as next of kin for Miss Orlova? And maybe they meet him right there, and he is maybe a bit stunned and kind of curious as he sees the characters with a creepy smile of Gunther von Hagen or something similar. But yeah, if I think there's also the not to forget that Magda's body kind of just as she died then starts to convulse again, and there's this whole body horror image that happens that might be maybe shocking a few of the nurses that might be slightly aware or something. It is a good scene, so I think it is worth that at least one, maybe two characters, or like a portion of the character should see this, as it definitely changes kind of that shocking element further, because the question is then, well, maybe death isn't it, and it will continue to be painful. So there is no relief that she didn't suffer, but she will continue to suffer, which will be a common theme throughout the next couple of chapters. So, at least as I described, that's how my characters met the pathologist, Dr. Hans-Georg Richter. And, he was... Well, for my characters, he was suspicious. They didn't want to believe him. They didn't trust him, especially when he offered them some pastries down at the morgue and some coffee to kind of talk about the situation. They were on edge, to say the least, looking for possible ways out, exit strategies, any sharp or blunt objects in vicinity that they could reach for in case something goes wrong. It was a very tense scene. While in my case, Dr. Richter was just the cheery, creepy pathologist who then just made some coffee next to, a extricated head or a brain tissue sample. Had his sandwich next to, a freshly carved out liver, and just enjoyed his little downstairs studio, I called it in a sense, with some light classical music playing from his office through an old creaky radio, which gave me the Hannibal Lecter kind of vibe element to it. How was your reaction with him?
Yeah, they were skeptical, obviously. I think probably maybe not as skeptical for some reason. There were some reader person roles involved. It's like, is he lying? What is he about to do? It's like, no, he's not lying, and he's about to, tell you everything he knows about this disease that he's fascinated about.
But what is his intention? He's gonna hurt us, right?
Yeah, and I really love that it's sort of this sort of like bait and switch aspect of it, that he absolutely has all the trappings of like a really, really sinister person with all this. It's sort of, eating Danishes like in the room next to the corpses and so on. And he already has, started taking samples from Magda's body that he's like too fascinated about it. And he's got this occult literature interest, and, that is all is wrong with him. But actually he is probably one of the most benign and helpful characters in the entire campaign. Like, he has essentially no bad intentions. He probably doesn't have the best bedside manners, because he will, tell them pretty bluntly that he can't help them in any way, but maybe he can understand the disease so that they might help others in the future, and that's kind of the best he can offer. But I just really love that, and that sort of compensates for the fact that he's just a big kind of information dispenser as well at the same time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Part of my characters, until the very end, they were like, this is the most useless person. He knows stuff, but like he knows not enough. So like, therefore he is useless. He doesn't know anything. He has all the ideas and he wants to study us, but like he doesn't know anything. He's a useless person and we don't get anything from him. But at the same time, well, he offered to kind of dig more in and get their samples to kind of help track how they're doing. But obviously they were too suspicious of giving him anything. They agreed at some point to give him 1 or 2 blood samples. But yeah, it was always contested that if he was actually helpful or another plant from some other shady organization that they started to realize is working against them. However, he was the one who actually offered the characters after the end of this chapter his car to flee Berlin and basically gave them a way out of Berlin, understanding the situation they were in. And, well, yeah, allowed them to head out of the Hexenkessel, as we call it in German, the witch's cauldron. That is Berlin after the end of this chapter. But he does bring, I think, not to quote my players, in contrary to my players' expectations, he brings in a couple of books that list the disease progression from World War I and World War II, where he has recognized the disease, and that's kind of why he is so fascinated. I think that is a good element of the story, and can be obviously then also expanded as a handout, because it's not really a handout. It's more like I think a small paragraph about there were similar cases in World War II or at the Russian front. That is it. It can be expanded. I took some time to kind of expand it into a more private, declining mental journal of a Russian soldier who, up to the end, kind of wrote his kind of observations, and then the last entry was from the field doctor, who basically described the illusion of the patient has finally overcome him, and the patient died at this and this date. So, yeah, good option too if you are into making handout or want to add more elements. This is a beautiful part where you can maybe great parents of the characters are mentioned in these journals by some sheer coincidence, or they met in awkward ways. The world is your oyster at this point.
Yeah. I agree. This is where it would have been. It would be good to have a couple of excerpts here if the characters want to dive a little bit deeper and look at the books. And I guess it's also good to sort of also nip the investigation in the bud if it's starting to like lead them completely off, which it potentially could, I guess. Here's also the connection with the Second World War and Russia, and sort of this gives the ability to drop a little bit more emphasis on Leningrad here.
Exactly.
And that's good. I had already had a little bit of foreshadowing in dreams or so on, so we were already sort of primed to start thinking about Leningrad during the Second World War. And here was like, I guess, the first point where we really pushed on that, sort of like, look, something with the dream curse was something about the thing that had happened to you happened to people during the siege of Leningrad. I sort of made it that way.
Beautiful. Yeah, again, I think it's underrated, that little paragraph, and it can be expanded to something more in-depth. And I think, you had also this beautiful novel that Magda was writing. Maybe she had some research done and found similar sources to that book, or to a similar book maybe as well.
Yeah. You could probably expand on Magda's literary thing there. Yeah.
But yeah, I think after the massive, I don't want to call it lore dump, but it is. The characters are then left with a choice, pretty much. They can be test subject for Dr. Richter, the friendly but creepy pathologist, to understand their own disease progression, and in the hope that maybe a scientist could figure out what to do and how to cure them, in the hope of modern medicine. Or they decide to not interact with him ever again, which would be unfortunate.
Yeah, because in a way, his scientific understanding here is a bit shady, right? And he cannot cure the disease, of course. Scientists, what do they know?
Mm-hmm.
But he can provide some. He can provide some additional like files and handouts later, right? Because he's not really so. He doesn't seem to be so serious about like confidentiality and things like that. So he can provide Magda's journals or copies thereof, for example, and he can also look into Philip Kramer, Sasha Pogodin, and Anton Mahler a little bit, and be a sort of a way in to get some sort of more information there. Unless the player characters have some other types of insider connections where they can get like documents from the police or anything like that. So he can be helpful.
That is true, yeah, and I think that is that there's a good point to remind that he is already in the German government and he has access to the medical databases, so he is connected. He can pull information and he has friends. So technically, if all fails and maybe the players left some sort of contact information, he might contact the players if they are stuck, to just kind of put them back on the track without having to stare as a GM too many hurdles and hoops, but rather have him reintroduce like, I found you and I realized that we might have some more information about this and this. Yeah, that's a good point.
It does strike me, however, that if you sort of skip the whole hospital thing because you as a group are too shady to want to even go to the hospital or stay when the ambulance arrives or whatever, which could for certain groups be a possibility. I guess you might be able to find all these documents of Magda's journals and information about the Russians by some kind of like shady connections as well. But I guess you would risk missing out on the lovely creepy NPC who eats Danishes in the morgue, and also maybe the background about the disease and I don't know. You could pop that in somewhere else where there are occult books, possibly, but it would be a little bit out of the way, I guess.
I presume that if the players wouldn't encounter him, one scene where it might be possible, if they are decent enough, Magda's funeral, which is only a short paragraph and a scene suggestion afterwards. But unfortunately, my players didn't want to go to the funeral because they were a bit too afraid of being associated or too concerned that the 3 Russians would have been there, or there were just considerations on their part, and also their individual kind of downfall into the spiral of the disease that just kind of racked them for a good amount of time afterwards. The funeral is held, I think, a week later or something at a Russian Orthodox funeral cemetery outside of Berlin, or on the outskirts. And she is well liked, so you have about 50 or so people, I think it says, that are attending the funeral. So a number of NPC options to still kind of trickle in clues and options. And I think as it mentions as well, the priest also mentions that Magda has rekindled her interest in iconography and items of religious resemblance, which could be also quite interested him for the characters, as the father is also quite interested in icons himself. And well, we'll see what other priests and fathers of the faith are also interested in the characters and iconographies later on. But yeah, did you use the funeral scene, or did you have a funeral?
Yeah, we also didn't do the funeral. They were too busy with chasing the Slavic Association and being chased themselves at that point.
Yep.
I think the funeral could also be prime territory for, if you haven't had sort of so many visions and premonitions and so on, you could probably sneak something in there when Magda's coffin is lowered, or while some prayer is going on, or something like that. If you want a little bit of the funeral of an ex-incarnate of Binna, maybe you could have a little bit of a Black Madonna appearance there. I'm not entirely sure what it would look like, but if you don't feel that you've had enough mysterious stuff happen in your campaign at this point, that could be an opportunity.
That's a good point, yeah. And yeah, I think then after that, the players are open to explore Berlin in a massive way. They should have by now at least some connections, some leads. They should have an address for the Slavic Association. The names Philip Mahler, Anton Mahler, Philip Kramer, and Sasha Pogodin. This way.
Yeah. Yeah, the names are all over Magda's diaries and the Slavic Association newsletter and Kramer's book and so on. So now it's if they're not suspecting these guys at this point, then something is wrong.
Exactly, and then we also have the beginning of the investigation of the Slavic Association and the kind of first kind of return of the renewed or the focused interest of the three Russians upon the characters after they've experienced severe nightmares and dreams about them over the last couple of weeks. And yeah, they are curious who they were and why they were meeting Magda so shortly before she died. So yeah, I think that is the beginning of the actual stress of the campaign. I think up till now it was all in good faith in a sense of an exploration, and there were creepy things happening, but I think after Magda's death, that's where the pressure dial is kind of slowly increasing now, step by step. Yeah, but what is your take on the Berlin openness, or any comments here?
Yeah, I conceivably, you could go almost anywhere in the first few chapters of the campaign right now, right? You could set off to Frankfurt under order if you wanted to, and go into the Frankfurt clinic, because that's, if you go through Magda's journals, you try to call the place where she was hospitalized in Berlin. They refer to confidentiality and they won't tell you anything. But if you call the next one on the list, the Frankfurt clinic, then they seem more bribable over there, and maybe you make the connection to Pyotr's postcard. So you could conceivably go dive into chapter 2 already, if you wanted to. And if the GM has followed your advice from episode, one of our previous episodes, chapter 4, the German Autumn, is also open now, so you can go investigate Germanische Gemeinschaft and the Nazi connection, and probably discover from the other end, possibly, that they are connected to the Slavic Association.
Yep.
But the only real options within chapter 1, I guess, are investigate the 3 Russians and their homes, and investigate the Slavic Association, I suppose. And
yes, like you could, I think, as I mentioned before, bring in Chapter 4 with the Germanische Gemeinschaft through their car breaks down. The mechanic shop picks them up, and guess what mechanic shop that is? Because they're just close by. We discussed it before we started recording, but like a good point of source for some recreational enhancements. If the player characters have a drug obsession or drug abuse issue, well, maybe they are getting their stuff from the Toxic Cafe, or getting referred to there to have the best and the cleanest product in Berlin. It is, I think, now, as you said, it should be kept in mind that you have all these options open, that you can already skip to the later chapters and include these different elements. But again, I think, as you rightly said, the main focus should be that they should begin their own investigation into the 3 Russians, however that is possible. And most likely that will go through the Slavic Association. They're also plagued by nightmares after Magda's death, when kind of the intensity of the curse becomes a bit more agonizing. And I think, the dreams can be then also a good point to seed a couple of vague ideas, memories, and or prediction, future premonitions, outcomes, maybe something that you want to steer the characters into throughout your Berlin exploration. And I think, how long did you take to kind of get the characters going to the Slavic Association? Was it quite imminent, or?
So our group pretty much started out there after they were as I'm going to, we should never assume too much about player character behavior, but I think this is probably fairly mainstream behavior at this point. After looking at the ritual, putting 2 and 2 together with the Slavic Association, like, oh, this place is really sketchy. Okay, we gotta go investigate that immediately. So it was really Slavic Association first, and then the 3 Russians' apartments or addresses the second, and that was quite literally what they did as soon as they could after finding Magda. With a bit of diversions for, going to get lunch and dealing with some disadvantages and dark secrets popping up and having bad dreams, but they were pretty much laser focused on these parts, as I'm sure many groups running Chapter 1 are.
Exactly. And one of the ways to connect them, if again they have not found or maintain any of the direct clues to lead them to the Slavic Association, if they have access to Dr. Richter, he can then provide Magda's medical records, which connects to Frankfurt and the Order. They also learn a bit about her kind of background at that point. The investigation into the 3 Russian can begin, which I think that is a point where you should feel free to kind of bend a bit the realism in how the information was procured, because the players should find at least the information, or maybe find the point that there is information available for mostly Philip Kramer, but very few and fewer for Mahler and Pogodin, which should make them also cautious. Why is there barely anything on them? So I think it is worth to kind of bend a bit the rules, or if you have ex-Stasi, to utilize their old networks and contacts. There's black markets. I mean, the Stasi headquarters was pretty much overrun in the aftermath of the fall of the wall, and people took documents, and they were just flown through the staircases. And who says that not a shady black market dealer has procured at least some bits of information at that point? How was the investigation for the 3 given of the government records, I suppose? In your case, did you give them a chance to kind of find these?
I if they had pulled some strings in that direction, I totally would have. But as a matter of fact, they didn't. So, okay. I mean, they eventually, came over that information in different ways. But I still think, actually, to this point, which is end of chapter 1, the group does not know that Kramer is a wanted man. Actually, but I'm sure that's going to be on the news with their faces on the news very soon.
Yeah,
that's a different story. And I also think, like you said, there are many ways to get to this, like through criminal connections or maybe some political connections. And if you have a character who has the Stasi background, they would probably know about Mahler and maybe even know the fact that he has sort of gone, quote unquote, clean with this security firm that he has now that is manned by all these ex-Stasi young agents and so on. So that might be information that the player characters just know, potentially.
Yeah. There's actually also a good point to caution, because investigation to the police could also connect them directly to the Gemeinschaft, again, through Leonhard Freude and his kind of troops, so where they're like, why are you looking into this? So if they might not succeed and you want to amp up the pressure, maybe the police officer they thought they could bribe is working for the Gemeinschaft and or has his ties in. Similar to actually the rich, the famous, the influential, if you have academics with influence or something. Consider the option that maybe 1 or 2 of those are at Pagodin's sex dungeon parties, who then might be alerting the Russians that, hey, there's somebody kind of asking questions about you. What do you want me to do? Give them the real stuff, or we didn't find anything? Consider that you have that skill, and I think encourage the players to investigate and to kind of figure out that there is this deep web of intrigue that has spanned over Berlin and that is connecting these powerful people with this powerful entity. It shouldn't feel hopeless. Don't make your players feel like everything is like stacked against them. We could just die and end it now. It should feel like they should make progress, but there are consequences always kind of coming towards them. So if they inquire, maybe they suddenly get increased citation or warnings for parking tickets that they haven't paid, or speeding tickets. They might need to pay loans back or something. Ramp up the pressure in different elements that kind of hit the characters in their private area, rather than to make it feel like there's nothing they can do to find or to advance in the story. Just maybe from that perspective, but utilize the options that you have. I think that is my main point.
I think that's a very good point, because this is the most complex part of the investigation in the campaign, in a way, like with all these clues and all these names. I mean, I do this thing where when it starts getting complex, where I make like an updated handout just for the players. I mean, they do take notes, but there are a lot of names. So I like list out important NPCs and so on, which also is a opportunity for me to editorialize a little and take away, Ada Lohmann's secretary when I think that she doesn't have any additional information, right? Just so reduce the target area for red herrings just a little bit. But I mean, this can become quite complex. They're like, at some point I had like 20 names almost on this list, right? It's a lot. And we, in my opinion at least, I mean, we're not playing Sherlock Holmes Gnostic Detective, right? We are doing a horror game with an investigative element, right? So the lovely thing about investigation in Kult, by the way, if you want to learn more about that, I know that David has another video series going with where you can learn a lot about the investigation move. It's good stuff. But one of the good things about the investigation move specifically is that it sort of says that it will give you all the clues that are, pertinent. And then even on a fail, the answer is not, oh, you don't learn anything. Even if you fail horribly and the GM does an awful GM move, at least you have probably learned that Mahler and Pogodin have people in high places who are protecting them. Or you've gotten some other information here. So you're always making progress in some ways, even though it might be in also with tension, like ramping up or disasters happening, depending on how things shake out.
Exactly. And it is also the option to bring in, again, NPCs can also be kind of a means of distributing information. And when my players got stuck, I introduced slightly disgruntled newspaper reporter who wrote a few articles on, the Slavic Association, their corruption scandals in the past, and he's trying to expose them for his own vigilante aspect. And he had this whole backstory about his sister being kind of taken by them as if she was in a cult and she didn't want to speak to him anymore. And so, like, I created for them an inn, and through a character that can travel, that can move, that can combine information and share them, like a handout. Here, this is what I found. And by that, outlining the investigation to somebody that they might know, they trust, hire. There are options to do that and to allow the characters to advance, to kind of continue their narrative and their story as well. And I think throughout this whole action and the intense focus on like figuring all this out, there should also be time taken apart to focus on the characters at this stage, because it is the point where the disease begins to break out, their bodies start to deteriorate, and you want to kind of get their introspection. How does that affect if they have family? How does it affect their partners or romantic relationships? Are they retreating themselves out of life, and what happens surrounding them? This is an important part because they will need to make a decision very soon in order to decide if they want to flee, face the authorities, or just head to Moscow.
Yeah, that's a good point. This might be the last chance to see a lot of relations and sort of important people in the player characters' lives, at least while things are relatively speaking somewhat normal. And if you have disadvantages and dark secrets that are sort of firmly anchored in Berlin, or even worse in Hamburg, I guess you should press those really hard at this part of the game so that they really get to come into play. If you have a character like the KGB defector who has probably a lot of their dark secrets in Soviet, then they can kind of wait a little bit. But if it's, for example, in our group we had a character who had victim of passion disadvantage connected specifically to a particular ex-partner of this character, and of course that person lives in Berlin. So I took opportunity to like trigger that as much as I could while it was still sort of expedient to do so. And I think that just by the nature of how Cult works, that leads to a lot of interesting role-playing and conflict just by sort of activating those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is perfect. And again, there's as you nicely summarized, that's probably the last time they need to have to kind of deal with their friends, families, and whatsoever before other things will happen. Again, there are various locations to enter. That I just also opened the book. The Mantra Bookshop, for those that are not privy to the occult, can learn about the occult angle of this. There's a nice lady, Erica, who tells them that she knows Philip Kramer and kind of knows his background in the scene. So, like, opening up the whole Berlin underground rave disco angle, if you want to go into that. I mean, who doesn't love a maybe even vampire-esque Legions of Darkness and embroidered underground rave in Berlin with potentially meeting Philip Kramer there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, there must be Children of the Night at discos in Berlin in 1991. That seems obvious to me.
So. Yeah, that is almost a given. Yeah. So in that perspective, I think this is a good point actually to start for tonight's episode, part 2 of the Killer Stands. And we'll go deeper into detail for maybe the Slavic Association, the further chapters of this, in our next episode. Martin, any last final words of wisdom, maybe to Apartment, the death of Magda, the background information, anything that kind of you want to highlight again?
No, I don't think. Well, I guess one thing, and we touched upon it a little bit. This is where the curse starts ratcheting up. Right, the curse is this bullet point list of things that happen at different points, and like you already said, but this is where that starts to become really juicy as well. And I wrestled a little bit with the bullet point list for the curse actually, and I think this might be an instinct that a lot of people have. I don't know. I looked at this bullet point and was like, this is a little wishy-washy. I wish this was, a little harder, had a little bit more mechanics in it. Let's say that there has to be a fortitude roll at this point, otherwise you feel really crummy, or there should be a keep it together when you wake up from dreams here or there, right? And I guess there's a piece of advice to other GMs out there. You don't need to do that. That comes naturally if you just follow the bullet point list. The keep it togethers will trigger themselves. So don't bother to make like a list with check boxes or whatever. Just follow the bullet points.
Good. Yep. I think that's a good point. Yeah. And again, the nightmares and everything that kind of inflict the characters can also be utilized to share or premonitions, information, ideas, guide the players throughout. And I think at that point in the chapter after Magda's death, my main recommendation is just it's separating again, as I mentioned before. Give the players the option to explore all the leads, including the Germanische Gemeinschaft and the consequences of looking into Philip Kramer and the others, because that will ultimately all point them back to the 3 Russians. All the connections through Germanische Gemeinschaft, they are connected to Slava and everything. So like there's not something that you would give them without reason. It might be information that they learn later, but they already have it and they kind of advance in their narrative. But at the same time, also make sure to focus on the personal drives and development of the characters. Because after Berlin, things will get juicy, they will get under pressure, everything will kind of advance faster and faster and harder. And this is the last time where you can actually kind of focus on relationships, on elements of the characters' kind of inner thoughts and their decision about how they want to proceed. I mean, that is the turning point of a normal day worker to decide, do I want to now give up my job and hunt down people who cast a dream curse upon me, and I'm infected by larvae, and I'm gonna die within 6 months. So, what? Or do I accept my fate and just say I will spend the 6 months with my family? Not that they should, but there is the option that this is the turning point for many characters if they're connected, if they have relationships, an existing life. So take time to kind of include that. Don't rush. Take the 1 or 2 sessions here at that point to kind of give the characters time to develop, and then continue with focusing on the Slavic association and the actual storyline. That is, I think, my biggest piece here. And the biggest observation that I missed when running it the first time, I rushed it too fast after Magda's death. I didn't give enough time to resolve elements of relationships and connections. Yep. So, with that, thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back shortly with the third part for the Killer Stands. So stay tuned, and see you then.